China reflects on 40 years of reform. European Union Africa Summit is underway with migrant issues dominating the first day. And it's all systems go for Madagascar's elections. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Ramah Nyang with the day's business headlines.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Civil servants in Zimbabwe stage a protest demanding payment in US dollars. And the Gambia is looking for financial and economic advisors to rein in its soaring public debt. We'll have the details on that and plenty more coming up for you in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Ramah, thank you. Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, has delivered a speech at the conference commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up. He reviewed the remarkable progress China has made in the past 40 years and praised the hard work of the Chinese people. Our reporter Zhu Yun has more details.
Poverty is not socialism. We must keep abreast of the times. At the start of Xi Jinping's speech, he recalled Comrade Deng Xiaoping's guide for the reform and opening up policy that began 4 decades ago. At the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, China has made the decisions to shift the focus onto economic development. That was a historic moment, and massive changes have taken place since then.
After the party's 16th National Congress, Chinese Communists made the overall plan for building social justice. 18th Party Congress, we have introduced more than 1,600 reform initiatives, cracked many hard nuts, and navigated through dangerous currents.
President Xi summarized the progress and achievements made during the 4 decades. He pointed out that China has remained committed to environmental protection and to the great cause of peaceful reunification of the motherland. Xi Jinping said that in the past 40 years, continued efforts have been made to strengthen and improve party leadership.
No tolerance has been shown in the crackdown on corruption. The anti-corruption campaign has delivered a crushing victory. The revolutionary tempering has made our party the backbone of the Chinese people and Chinese nation, always at the forefront of the times.
40 years experience has become the guide for the future. Xi Jinping called for enriching and growing such assets through further reform and opening up. He adds that a new form of international relations featuring win-win cooperation should be continued.
China would never pursue development at the cost of others' interests, nor will China ever give up its own legitimate rights and interests. China pursues its national defense policy that is defensive in nature, and China's development poses no threat to any other country. And achieving national rejuvenation is like a relay race in which the baton is passed down from generation to generation.
Meanwhile, 100 people were given the title Pioneer of Reform for their outstanding contributions to their lines of work. Also, 10 foreigners from important fields have received the Friendship Awards for their contributions to China's reform. China's reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has left an incredible chapter in history. Moreover, the country's commitment to further open up, as well as the new policies and guidelines mapped out this time, will enable the country to make new achievements and also make new contributions to the world in the years ahead. So, CGTN reporting from the Great Hall of the People, Beijing.
In response to President Xi Jinping's speech of the 40-year anniversary of Chinese economic reform, Dr. Jonas Adaye, who is an international relations expert from Ethiopia, gives his views on the benefits of trade with China.
When you have this road and belt initiative, it brings people together, cultures together, and it develops understanding among the people. That's extremely important. The terms of trade, as I said already, is not exploitative. It's not exploitation, but to my understanding, it is a give and take. It is for the benefit of both countries, because as I always hear from your President Xi Jinping, that we have common destiny for human common good. So that being the case, then the trade is expected to deal with, of course, China and other partners on equal basis.
African and European leaders are in Vienna for the African-European Forum. The meetings discuss the cooperation and partnerships between the two continents. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has been keen to join the forum. Egypt is taking the presidency of the African Union next year and wants to maintain the continent's strong ties with Europe. Here's Adel Mahroui with more.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is in Vienna for an extended 4-day visit to enhance bilateral ties with Austria and participate in the Africa-Europe Forum. El-Sisi has been keen to hold extensive talks with Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, as Austria is currently the rotating president of the EU Council.
Egypt is going to be the president of the African Union in 2019, which means it's going to be the key player in the European-African connection during that time. So the timing of the meeting is very important to plan the future of ties between both continents.
Egypt has strong relations with Europe, which is essential to make its AU leadership successful.
Egypt is one of our most important trade partners in Africa and the Middle East. I deeply appreciate Egypt's economic reform and the dynamics taking place in Egypt under your leadership. We are convinced that there are many capabilities that can make us cooperate more.
Cairo understands that one of Europe's prime concerns is the flow of migrants from Africa. Egypt has been playing an integral role to curb illegal migration and promised to continue doing so.
Not a single boat of illegal migrants has left Egypt this year. We've prohibited every boat and even people trying to illegally cross land borders on their way to Europe. It's a humanitarian and ethical commitment from Egypt. We won't allow that Africans or any refugee to leave Egypt and be doomed at sea.
The two countries have also signed 10 MOUs to enhance cooperation in numerous fields. The Vienna meetings will help Egypt build a stronger insight when the turn comes for it to lead the next African-European talks, which Africa will host in February. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's go to Brussels now for more on the European Union Africa Forum taking place in Vienna, Austria. CGTN's Kevin Ozebek is there for us. Kevin, the summit wrapped up with Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz saying migration was not the focus here, but was it still one of the themes of the summit?
Oh, absolutely. Now, the Austrian Chancellor said really the whole point of this meeting and the summit was to talk about how the EU and Africa can work together in a new digitized economy. But really, there was the undercurrent of migration there. And that's because for 3 years now, migration has really been a strong presence, to say the least, in European politics. Also, one thing that's very important to stress is that the EU policy towards Africa does have a lot to do with migration. The EU wants to really change its relationship with Africa. It no longer wants to give the continent aid. Rather, it really wants to be a source of sustainable development. And that's really how the EU is pivoting its Africa policy. It believes if it can fund programs and boost investment on the continent, there will be jobs created in Africa. And there really will not be so much of an incentive for young Africans to leave because they'll have plenty of opportunities right there at home.
So, Kevin, you have mentioned that the EU wants to be a source of economic sustainability for the continent. How does the EU view its changing relationship with Africa?
Well, it really wants to help boost the African continent and go from this relationship of what was once a colonial power to an equal relationship. And European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker stressed that over and over again when he was in Vienna for the summit. He said, it's time that we have this equal partnership. A lot of this also has to do with the Chinese relationship on the African continent. President Juncker said there's a lot of African countries in debt to China now, but the EU relationship with the continent continent can be much different. The emphasis for Europe is trying to get European companies to invest in Africa because they see that there are many emerging markets on the continent. You have countries like Ethiopia, which are seeing huge, rapid, explosive growth. So it's a source of new income, a source of a bigger market for European firms. But also it wants to change the relationship because of that growing market, but also investment in Africa from Europe. The EU sees it, can also help sustain the flow of migration.
There is a lot of talk, though, Kevin, at these kind of summits, but does anything actually concrete come out of it?
Yeah, there were some actual concrete signings of programs there. The EU pledged at the summit to put forward 75 million euros into a fund that is going to help mostly refugee and women entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa. So these are people that may not before had such an easy time getting loans to help or start a small business. This program aims to change that, and the EU has loftier goals for this program. It wants to see it expand. Also at the summit, there was a signing for the EU to help the AU build and grow an AU digital single market. That's something the EU has tried a lot here, is to grow and develop and incubate a digital single market here in Europe. It wants to help Africa do the same on its continent.
All right, Kevin Nozubek joining us there from Brussels. Thank you. An emergency meeting of the Arab League kicked off Tuesday in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, to discuss recent Israeli escalations against the people of Palestine. According to an earlier statement released by Palestinian Foreign Ministry, Palestine requested the meeting with a view to discussing a recent uptick in Israeli-Palestinian violence. Let's go live to Cairo now for a debrief of the meeting with CGTN's Adel Mahuri. Adel, give us a summary of the resolutions that came out of this meeting.
It was an 8-point summary or resolution of today's emergency delegates meeting in the Arab League. The main purpose was actually to respond to the recent escalations seen by the Israeli forces in the West Bank. The reports at least that throughout that week 5 Palestinians were killed and 12 injured, and in just a couple of 2 days, according to the Palestinians imprisonment authority or state, the organization said that at least 100 Palestinians have been arrested during that period. The meeting also comes to comment on Brazil's and Australia's recent decisions to move their embassies to West Jerusalem. The meeting mainly condemned the recent escalations from the Israeli side. It held the state of Israel responsible for all the casualties, and it wants to see those who have killed the Palestinian civilians be put forward to trial. It has also called upon the United Nations Security Council to take responsibility in the resolutions that have been previously agreed upon in the Security Council that maintains the security and the safety of Palestinian civilians. And it also threatened that it will take a step further by communicating through the international community, maybe taking to decisions to vote for by the next General Assembly in order to get a sort of a unanimous global condemnation to what is going on and the recent escalations that has been seen. It has also warned about any attempts to tamper or to denigrate with the president of the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. And at the end of the resolution, it showed the Arab commitment to continue support to the Palestinians so that they can continue with their struggle and with their perseverance in the coming period, urging all Arab countries to continue the support, the financial support and the political support on the international level.
Well, Adel, Egypt has been trying to broker a peace deal between Palestine and Israel. So where exactly does that mission stand now?
There hasn't been any recent update. Egypt, since the violence that has been broke at the border fence with Gaza and Israel, and the scores died from the Palestinian side, Egypt has been trying to calm the situation down. It has been trying to talk to Hamas to resort to calm, and also the Israeli side as well. With the escalation seen in the West Bank, today during the Arab League meeting, the Egyptian delegate said that Cairo has been working and will keep working on its connection and communication with both sides to maintain a low-key, to tune down, the action, the violence going on, and try to mediate and continue with its mediation efforts between both sides. The talks are still ongoing as confirmed today, but there hasn't been any breakthrough, unfortunately, and there hasn't been any significant progress for Cairo, at least to announce yet. The Egyptian intelligence is leading such negotiations and talks with the Israeli side and with the Palestinian Authority as well.
Adel Mahrouri for us there in Cairo. Thank you. Well, it's election season in Africa. Madagascar, the country, heads to the polls Wednesday for its presidential runoff. The choice is between two former presidents, both convinced they will win. Millions are due to vote. CGTN's Penina Karibe has this update.
First-round voting went peacefully enough, and voters are hoping the runoff also will be trouble-free. The field has been cut to two, both men well-known, well beyond Madagascar's island coastline. Marc Ravalomanana ruled until 2009, when he was overthrown. Andry Rajoelina is the man who overthrew him and took charge until 2014. Rajoelina was just ahead in the first round. Both men are confident they will win the runoff. Campaigning has been intense. There are 10 million registered voters. For most, poverty is the key concern and food security.
It's been at least 4 years now since we last had a satisfying rate of rain. Consequently, since the local economy is based on agriculture and breeding, people have adopted a strategy. A little shock would drive them to be in a crisis situation.
Almost half of the island's children under 5 are chronically malnourished.
I hope the next president will be more aware about our situation. We suffer from hunger and we need more food aid.
44-year-old Rajoelina says Madagascar needs a young leader. 69-year-old Ravalomanana says it needs his expertise. What Madagascar really needs is an economic miracle. It's ranked by the World Bank as one of the world's poorest nations. Penina Karibe, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, Penina has been following that story and Madagascar's election throughout the election season. She's joining me now in studio to break it down for us on what to expect on these very highly contested elections. Penina, as you clearly state in your report, 44-year-old Rajoelina says Madagascar needs a young leader, but the other contender says he has the experience. Is age going to be a factor here?
Well, this is something that has definitely come up in the campaigns, Beatrice. Rajoelina, like you mentioned, a very young candidate. And the rivalry between these two candidates has actually been very intense. The campaigns have actually been personal. They've been throwing jibes at one another. And we've heard Rajoelina in his campaign saying that Ravalomanana should retire, he should go home and milk his cows. Now, I should point out, Beatrice, when I was there, I saw Rajoelina's campaigns very, very packed. I mean, he's very, very energetic. He appeals to the younger audience, like you mentioned. He invites top artists to come and perform in his campaign rallies. And definitely, as you'd expect, this pulls in the younger crowd. He's got very good communication skills, and he's a very charismatic person. But then the supporters of Ravalomanana will tell you, look, this is a professional we're dealing with. His nickname, the supporters affectionately refer to him as Papa or Daddy. And when he came back from exile in 2014, he embraced that name Daddy. He styled himself as the father of the nation, saying he's got the experience to build a prosperous Madagascar. So you're seeing people who are battling, one of them saying this is an old person, the other one saying, look, I've got the experience. Ravalomanana, by the way, was born in a peasant family. He was a milkman, hence the jibe by Rajoelina saying you should retire and milk your cows. And then he built this empire out of agriculture. And so his supporters will tell you, this is a man with experience, this is a man who's a self-made millionaire, right, and this is a man who can build the country. So age, I would say not so much a factor really, yes.
Right, there are 10 million registered voters there in Madagascar. When you spoke to the people when you were there for the last election, what is it they talked about? What did they say was their motivation to vote?
One word, Beatrice: change. Change, change, change. Almost every person we spoke to back then was saying we need change in this country. Now, let me paint it for you, Beatrice. The World Bank says that Madagascar is one of the poorest countries in the world. This is a country with numerous natural resources. So this is a country with potential to be a top tourist destination, among the top tourist destinations in the world. But then this is a country, the World Bank says, that half of the population lives below the poverty line. 70% of the people, according to the World Bank, live on less than $1 a day. Now, Water Aid Madagascar says that 8 million Malagasy do not even have access to proper sanitation. We've got food shortages, especially in the southern part of the country. We've had 4 seasons without rain. That is 4 years of no rainfall. We've got humanitarian organizations such as World Food Program handing out food rations to people there. When you come to education, a lot of people cannot afford to take their children to school. So a lot of people will tell you we need change, change, change. That is what they're voting for.
So for Rajoelina and Ravalomanana, though, either of them, whoever wins this election, what is it they have to offer?
Well, they actually have very different policies. Rajoelina says that he wants to fashion Madagascar into this very prosperous country. He's been talking about building factories that can build solar panels and light up every single homestead in Madagascar. He's been talking about having Tamatave port being turned around into the Madagascar Miami. He's talking about building roads. He's talking about putting tracker devices in zebu cows as a way of combating cattle rustling. Now, his critics are laughing at those policies and saying, you cannot come here and tell us that you'll turn this port into Miami. People here don't need Miami, they need food on the table. When you listen to Ravalomanana, he's actually riding on the fact that when he came back from exile, he studiously quoted all the international donors that have been supporting Madagascar. The World Bank actually says during his reign, the economy grew. Now he's saying, I built roads. These roads have been neglected ever since. Just recently, he's going to invest heavily in education. Right. So very different policies of these two candidates. Whichever one wins, I guess the biggest task will be implementing what they're promising the voters.
Quite an interesting election to watch there tomorrow, Penina. Thank you for your insights. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The Marrakesh Migrants Compact has been adopted at the UN General Assembly. And the controversial voting machines are ready for DRC's upcoming election.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The United Nations General Assembly has overwhelmingly approved the adoption of the Global Compact on Refugees. The non-binding agreement strengthens protections for refugees. The US and Hungary were vocal opponents of the pact. The vote passed 181 to 2. The Dominican Republic, Eritrea and Libya abstained from voting. A follow-up global refugee forum will be held every 4 years.
The Hungarian government decided not to join the Global Compact on refugees. As Hungary indicated during the negotiations of the document in Geneva, the government considers that the existing international legal framework adequately addresses refugee and asylum matters, and consequently, the government considers that there is no necessity for a new instrument in this regard. The government is also concerned that the differentiation between refugees and migrants, as well as the voluntary nature of responsibility sharing, is not adequately reflected in the document.
Let's get you an update now on the upcoming presidential poll in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country's Independent National Electoral Commission has been setting up electronic voting machines. The use of this equipment has been rejected by opposition candidates who claim they could be used to manipulate the election. Thousands of such voting machines recently went up in flames in the capital Kinshasa, fueling further speculation about the credibility of the planned vote.
DRC's electoral body CENI believes the voting machines will facilitate, speed up and give reliable and truthful results in the long-delayed presidential election now set for December the 23rd.
What does this machine offer? I can sum up the machine in 4 words. Facility, meaning the machine facilitates the vote. Reliability, because after the vote, the machine will give us 2 sources of results, even if the results that will determine the winner will be counted manually. Speed, because the period separating the announcement of the result will be shortened, thanks to the fact that the ballot is no longer a larger ballot, but small ballots that will be separated easily.
Last week's blaze at a CENI depot destroyed 8,000 of the 10,368 voting machines due to be used in the capital Kinshasa. CENI did not say who it believed to be responsible for the fire, but said the election would go ahead as scheduled.
This machine has arrived to eliminate any attempt of cheating that we may have had in 2011 and 2006. The machine has arrived to correct this.
But the opposition claim the machines are more vulnerable to vote rigging than paper and ink, and could be compromised by the unreliability of DR Congo's power supply. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
During his visit to Tunis on Tuesday, the head of the UN support mission in Libya, Ghassan Salameh, said that some positive economic indicators have been recorded in the country. This comes despite growing concerns about the security situation.
The Special Representative of Secretary General and head of the UN support mission in Libya, Ghassan Salameh, is in Tunisia to discuss the situation in the North African state, which has been devastated by unrest and armed conflicts.
There are positive signs in Libya. The UN's goal is to hold national dialogue in Libya with all stakeholders who have their say on the ground. Tunisia has the same as the UN. We back any peaceful settlement to the Libyan crisis.
Salameh noted that the escalation of the situation in Libya will have negative repercussions on its neighbors. Accordingly, militiamen are obstructing the work and effort of state institutions.
We have discussed frankly the situation in Libya. The future of Libya is important to its neighbors and especially Tunisia because of security, financial, economic, social and political concerns. Chiefs of armed militia who are still taking arms should be held to account. They benefit from the status quo.
For the first time since his first visit to Tunis, the UN official mentioned the improving economic situation in many Libyan cities.
The situation has slightly improved in Libya. The ceasefire has been maintained and respected by all signatories of the UN deal. The economic situation is improving, including the exchange rate issue. Economic reforms are underway, but they cannot be implemented without security. The situation is still fragile.
Faiz al-Sarraj and Ghassan Salameh inaugurated in November 3 rehabilitated police training facilities in Tripoli. The rehabilitated facilities will house trainings for Libyan police and judicial police officers.
During his meeting with Tunisian Foreign Minister Ahmed Jhinawi, Ghassan Salameh affirmed the Libyan authorities and the UN commitment to support Libya's regular police as well as its armed and security forces in a bid to limit the spread of armed militias. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to inject nearly $57 million more towards the G5 Sahel alliance. The French president made the pledge after meeting his Burkina Faso counterpart, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, at the Élysée Palace. The G5 Sahel alliance is made up of 5 African countries: Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, Niger and Mauritania. The group is focused on mitigating organized crime and reducing the threat of terrorism in the region. According to Burkina Faso's Kabor, jihadist activity in the Sahel has increased, resulting in over 600 schools being shut down. The two presidents also signed agreements pledging financial assistance that will help with electrification of train lines in the Sahel region, spur investments in professional integration and rural electrification, as well as water treatment.
In keeping with the Sahel emergency plan put in place by the government of Burkina Faso, the French Development Agency will invest nearly 50 million euros in additional funding to the region in 2019 in the areas of professional integration, electrification of rural areas, and in water purification.
What we wanted to state was that the set of counter-terrorism measures are really urgent because today we have almost 600 schools which were closed between the east, the Sahel, and the north of Burkina Faso. These are large figures and demands that we can coordinate our cooperations between countries, between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and be able to reduce the circulation of these people between our borders.
The newly opened Chinese visa application center in Cairo is making it easier for Egyptians to apply for entry into the country. The center held its opening ceremony on Monday. It was created after a surge of visa applications had congested the consular section of Egypt's Chinese embassy. Around 60,000 Egyptians applied for Chinese visas this year. The center will strengthen both countries' ties and streamline the visa process. On to Morocco now, where the authorities have found the bodies of two Scandinavian women in the Atlas Mountains, a popular hiking destination. The bodies reportedly had violent marks on the neck, which might have been inflicted by what was described as a cold weapon. The deceased were found in a remote mountainous region about 10 kilometers from the center of Imlil. The Interior Ministry has opened an investigation, and so far one person has been arrested in connection with the deaths. Let's now take a look at Africa's business this hour. Here's Ramah Nyang. Ramah.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Civil servants in Zimbabwe are staging a protest. They're demanding payment in cold hard US dollars. And Gambia is looking for financial and economic advisors to help it rein in its debt.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's start in Zimbabwe, where teachers from rural areas are on the final leg of a 275-kilometer protest march from Mutare to Harare, the capital. Among other things, the protesters are demanding payment in US dollars and the reinstatement of their bonuses. More workers in the Southern African economy have been demanding payment in foreign currency, as inflation there hits levels not seen in a decade. CGTN's Farai Makutuya filed this report.
They may be few in number, but are walking for the cause of many. They are chanting, "We don't want bond notes, we want US dollars," adding their voices to a growing demand by public servants to be paid in hard currency.
Zimbabwe's finance minister has said Treasury simply cannot afford to pay salaries in US dollars, which means this very symbolic and physically rigorous effort may end up being all in vain.
Government says a multi-currency regime where bond notes and US dollars are at par will remain, but the market has already recalibrated.
The market is always ahead of the policymakers. So the market is re-dollarizing, and it's unsurprising that by the end of this year, we will see almost everyone demanding foreign currency for payments.
Making the US dollar the anchor currency, a move that brought much-needed stability in 2009 and which is hoped to steady the Zimbabwean ship again now, may not be easy this time round.
Re-dollarization is going to be very difficult to sustain because it is coming on the backdrop of too much money in the economy. We have got deposits or money supply of above 9 billion against foreign currency reserves of around 200 million. So this is unlike in 2009 when we started from scratch.
Government has fueled money supply through treasury bills. Finance Minister Mutuli Ncube has vowed to reduce issuance of the short-term paper. But it's his refusal to budge on currency reforms that has put him at odds with civil servants. Now on the final leg of their protest walk, rural teachers say they won't back down.
And if your demands are not met, then what? Schools are not going to open. We are going to be at tourist offices until our grievances are met. Next time, schools will not open.
That would pile more pressure on President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government, which is already dealing with growing unrest amongst its workforce, including public hospital doctors who are currently on strike. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Rua, Zimbabwe.
Elsewhere in West Africa, the Ministry of Finance in Gambia has appointed advisors to help put its public debt load on a more sustainable path. The country's been facing a huge debt burden, with the IMF warning against any new borrowing, and with good reason. The current accumulated debt position is 130% of GDP, and that was at the end of 2017. President Adama Barrow vowed to revive the country's faltering economy with sweeping reforms as he sought to draw a line under the erratic 22-year rule of his predecessor, Yahya Jammeh. Gambia suffered from grinding poverty, in part because of Jammeh's volatile rule, during which thousands of dissenters were jailed and scores of businesses expropriated by the state. As part of the oil-producing cartel, OPEC, Africa's biggest oil producer, has agreed to take part in output cuts that start from January 2019. Now, the cartel agreed to cut output by 1.2 million barrels of crude a day, along with other large non-OPEC producers like Russia. But there seems to be no guarantee, at least not at this point, that the high prices OPEC and its partners are aiming for will actually be attained. CGTN's Phil Ihaza looks at the impact this may have on Nigeria's economy.
Global oil prices have dipped by about 30% over the last 2 months, hovering around the $50 per barrel mark. A move by OPEC member oil production is targeted at reducing the surplus quantity of the product on the international market and boosting the price. As a result, beginning from January 2019, Nigeria, one of the world's top 10 crude oil exporters, will be looking to cut around 44,000 barrels from its 1.7 million barrel daily production. However, the development has increased pressure on budgets in oil exporting countries like the West African nation.
The price of oil, as it goes down, will affect the benchmark. Will also affect the amount of naira that the budget should be based on. Over 8 trillion naira. If the benchmark is lower than expected, it means that the deficit will be high. If deficit is high, who will give you the money? At what rate will the person give you the money? And how do you pay back?
Oil is Nigeria's economic mainstay, and for now the country needs to sell as much oil as possible to plug its budget and restore economic growth. But some experts say Africa's largest economy should not be so dependent on oil as a source of revenue.
It is unfortunate that year in, year out, we look at the pricing of oil in order to determine how our economy will go on. But at the same time, we say that our economy has gotten far away from oil, which is not true because over 90% of our forex comes from oil. Nigeria should, whether it likes it or not, to stop thinking oil and start thinking manufacturing, industrialization, service industry, innovative enterprises, and encouraging small businesses to use creative minds.
The drop is expected to remain in place for an initial 6-month period until June 2019, except for a possible review in the month of April by OPEC countries. The World Poverty Clock reports that nearly half of Nigeria's 200 million population currently lives in extreme poverty. The country's economy suffered a downturn in 2016 due to a global slump in oil price, and experts say the government may need to do more and quickly to prevent the economy from slipping back into recession. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
On to North Africa now, where the IMF has approved just under $3 billion in a precautionary liquidity line that's designed to help Morocco deal with external economic shocks. Now, that includes a possible spike in oil prices, even though, as you'll see a little later in Global Business, Brent crude is 7% lower so far this year. According to the fund, the 2-year arrangement will also give Morocco room to lower the public debt to GDP ratio over the medium term. That's forecast to go to 67.1% next year, up from 66.7% this year and 65.1% in 2017. 2 years ago, as you'll recall, the IMF granted Morocco a 2-year, $3.5 billion credit line as well. That let the North African state tap international capital markets on much more favorable terms. And finally, US trade policies are under the microscope, quite literally, in Geneva, as the World Trade Organization conducts a routine policy review. The wider context, however, as it has been pretty much all year, is the ongoing multi-billion-dollar trade row between Beijing and Washington. CGTN's Daniel Benjes filed this report.
Remarkable warning coming from the Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, who's speaking here in Washington at a time when the United States is coming under unprecedented criticism for the decisions it's making to avoid the World Trade Organization. And the prediction, in a sense, that came from the Deputy Director General, Alan Wolf, was that the organization's appellate court, the place where countries go when they've had a decision against them, may not exist in several months' time, that it could just fold within the next few months. And the reason for that is that the Trump administration has held up the appointment of judges, and they think the whole thing could essentially grind to a halt. And Alan Wolf, the Deputy Director General, really called out the international order to say it hasn't really reflected the concerns of ordinary people as it's moved towards the reform process.
There is a widespread fundamental understanding of nearly all governments of the utility of having a multilateral system, not just regional systems, not just bilaterals, but multilateral.
Now, the WTO would like to play a role in trying to resolve the tensions between the United States and China. And one particular reason for that is because without a rules-based system that's been established essentially since the Second World War, the rules themselves means countries become much more vulnerable to mercantilism, to the interests of political movements within each country.
But the middle position is for a truce, the détente, broaden the rules so that what the U.S. does is more within the rules and what the Chinese side does is more within the rules.
He nonetheless said he had optimism that the reform process in the end would work out because it's in the interests of all countries to be able to have a world trade system in which the rules are eventually observed. Daniel Wrenches, CGTN, Washington.
I'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour, though. We'll be looking at China's reform program. It's been running for the better part of 40 years now. It's made the country the world's second largest economy. But where does it go from here? Some answers coming your way at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, though, back to Beatrice.
All right, Ramah, thank you very much indeed. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. A treat for coffee lovers as we bring you a story on exactly where your brew comes from.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is known for producing some of the best varieties of coffee beans in the world. Here we take a look at a unique single origin coffee from the highest mountain peak in Africa, Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Wang Lulu has the report.
This has become one of the must-see places for the travelers who come to visit iconic Mount Kilimanjaro. Situated at the foothill of the highest mountain of Africa in Moshi town, the Union Cafe is serving you the locally brewed coffee, which also known as the taste of the mountain. Kilimanjaro coffee is Tanzania's unique single-origin coffee, which is cultivated in the volcanic soil on the slope of the mountain.
Kilimanjaro coffee is really special because it grows on volcanic soils. Our climate is really nice because of the rainforest and our dense shade tree cover all over the mountain. Volcanic soils and the altitude together, they are adding to a nice acidity that really determines the taste of our levels of Kilimanjaro, the high levels of just below the rainforest. And the body is a very rich body with sometimes fruity flavors of different fruit flavors depending on the season of our coffees of the Kilimanjaro.
Banti is one of the many farmers at the Kilimanjaro coffee plantation. People in Tanzania usually say the word pole pole, which in Kiswahili language means slowly. And Banti said the Kilimanjaro coffee is just this type of pole pole coffee. Different from the other machinery plantation of the coffee around the world, Kilimanjaro coffee's production takes time. From a seed to the hand-picking of the cherry, from washing to getting the beans dried under the African sun, grading and quality control before it finally becomes a cup of coffee. The unique variety of coffee is manually produced in a painstaking process.
What we want consumers to appreciate is you appreciate that the hard work done by a farmer. Producing quality coffee is not easy. Yeah. Quality products needs a lot of labor and dedication and loyalties towards that particular commodity. What we want is that the uniqueness of our coffee has got a lot of sweat from our farmers. That's how they can enjoy that particular.
And this is also what Tanzania is planning to include in its cultural and tourism offerings. Due to its geographic limits, Kilimanjaro coffee produces only 5,000 tons of beans a year, which is even less than 1% of the whole global market. But Tanzania hopes to promote its uniqueness around the world. And as the tourist numbers increase, local consumption will also help increasing the earnings of the coffee production sectors.
Our cafe, we have tourist clients, most of them. It's almost like 92% are tourists. If you see the geographically, Union Cafe is near by the Kilimanjaro Mount. So most of the people who are coming to climb the Mount Kilimanjaro, they starting their route at the cafe here, they're having their coffee, and then they are finishing their route here. After back from the mountain, they're having the coffee. So mostly of tourists who are coming to Kilimanjaro, they must come to our cafe.
Malulu, CGTN in Tanzania.
Elsewhere, the Moroccan city of Marrakesh is hosting the continent's biggest gaming event. Gamers are battling it out for a top spot on the international stage. Let's take a look.
It's a gaming competition like the continent has never seen. Teams from across Africa are in Morocco battling it out for a top spot at the Electronic Sports World Cup.
The competition and the overall event were impressive. It is not every day that we have a live tournament. It meant that we had to travel and transportation was not ideal. However, it is normal given that it was the first edition, but it was already very good. There is a very good cash prize.
Indeed, a $7,000 cash prize isn't too shabby. But the event also looks to provide an open space for everyone. The event, hosted by telecommunications company INWI, has drawn close to 100,000 people.
We wanted this event to be open to the public and to all ages. We are pleasantly surprised that so many people came. Many came with their families. It's a good time for sharing and for entertainment.
Teams from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire will battle it out for a top spot. Meanwhile, casual fans can enjoy a stress-free gaming experience. Astatal, CGTN.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. English Premier League side Manchester United sack manager Jose Mourinho.
Africa,